Yo, I'm Kavam,
Yo, I'm Rash.
and welcome to the Before Our Friends Die podcast on the akhi&saltfish digital network. This is the platform where we have the conversations we want to have before we leave this planet.
With that in mind, let's go.
Let's go. So, hello and welcome to Before Our Friends Die. I've got a bit of news, so unfortunately Rochelle can't be here with us today, but never mind. We've got two amazing guests to join us from Nationwide Building Society. So we'll start with Rachel to the left of me. Introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, I'm Rachel. So I work in the inclusion, diversity and wellbeing team within Nationwide. And aside from that, I also work in an employee network group too. So that's me.
Thanks for coming, Rachel. And in front of me, but virtually, we've got a very special guest, Prince. Introduce yourself.
Afternoon, my name's Prince and I work within the service and experience design team at Nationwide, and I led the Pledge for Change mission across the society, and I'm here today to talk to you about it and bring you on board on the journey.
Exactly that. This podcast is all about sort of getting to know the conversations that feel urgent. And I think sometimes when it comes to diversity, equality and inclusion, there's urgency there. There needs to be urgency, because if we leave things, to ponder, then things won't change. And you guys have done a really great job of captivating audiences, getting action going. And I wanted to talk a bit about that. So to give you some context as to why we're here, I sat in a meeting with you guys on is it cross-industry ethnicity roundtable, right? That you guys do. And you introduced these pledges and you told me about the impact they have across the building society. And I thought, I was really, mesmerized by that. I thought, wow, these guys have captivated such a large audience, made these huge numbers and made these huge commitments, but delivered on these commitments. I want to know, where did it all start for you both? So Rachel and Prince, where did this journey of making these pledges and making this impact start for you? Rachel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, of course. So I can't take complete credit for the pledge work because that was all Prince's baby and his idea, and he sort of brought it to me. So I got involved in that journey relatively late. But what I would say is I've been quite involved in the inclusion and diversity space since starting my career. I studied politics and international relations at uni. So I was really sort of switched on and concerned about things that were going on in the world and those sorts of things. And I wanted to bring that into my career. So when I got involved with Race Together, I was kind of which is the employee network group about ethnicity. I was linking in with all of these different initiatives that were going on, and I caught Prince and I thought, wow, this guy's got a really amazing idea, and I could see it taking off around the organisation. So we had a few conversations about what I might be able to do from a strategic point of view, and also how I can help kind of get it off the ground and broaden it out. So that's what kind of got us to the position we're at now, where we've taken it to an external roundtable, and we're trying to get lots of other people involved in it too, and also show that it has external reach internally to help us drive it.
Yeah. And Prince, what's your driver? Where did it start for you?
So for me, initially, I ran an inclusion and diversity day in my branch, where I asked different colleagues to cook food that represents their culture. Wicked. And then bring this food in and share it with colleagues as a way of educating themselves and each other on inclusion and diversity. However, I wanted to take this even further. So what I then did was I then asked the different branches in my region to all make a pledge about kind of what action they would all take to build an inclusive environment.
Yeah.
And it sort of took off from there.
Well, first of all, can I just... That food idea sounds phenomenal. I was speaking to my GEM staff network at work the other day, and the head of estates came through to say, because we suggested that we want some more culturally inclusive food across the institution, and they said that they want to put on a sort of taster session where they try and make these foods that feel authentic, and then they get our opinions on how they are and how they can be improved. Food lit everyone's eyes up in that meeting when we spoke about it. So I can just imagine the atmosphere in the branch where everyone's bringing in food, and it's that real personalization of it, isn't it? If you cook that food and you share it with your colleagues, that's a deeper bond than you would get by just suggesting a recipe, isn't it? So yeah, that sounds like a phenomenal idea from you, Prince. So
yeah,
obviously,
exactly, like with the food as well, because people can tell like personal stories about it, about their family, about their background, about an experience that they've been through in their life. So I think that was really impactful because it was something that was coming from the heart, and and it helped them kind of build their understanding of each other and of inclusion and diversity. So yeah.
So why pledges? What was the inspiration for you to say, okay, we've had this session where we shared food, but we need to create a pledge? What was that thought process behind that?
Yeah, so I guess for me, growing up as a Black African man in the United Kingdom, I've always felt prejudged based on the color of my skin.
Yeah,
I've always felt like I've had to work, 10 times as hard as my fellow white colleagues in regard to any career progression. So I wanted to take action that would drive cultural change, and so people like me wouldn't have to go through what I went to. And I thought that it would be very impactful if people can commit to an action about actually what they will do to champion inclusion and diversity. So yeah, that's where it came from for me.
nice. So my background is in academia. I work in university, and one of the questions that came up the other day when we spoke about this conversation was what research was done on pledges. So I'm just interested if you could give us some background, and I'm thinking as well, is there an opportunity where we could help you provide some research on pledges? You guys would now have an evidence base where you've got people who've done pledges, you've done reviews of pledges. What can we do to add to that knowledge base surrounding that? So I'd be interested in your insight. What research was done into pledges?
Yeah, sure. I'll take that first part of the question. So, in regards to the pledges, it wasn't about the research. It was about empowering our colleagues within the society to have that conversation about, a topic that some may find uncomfortable or that may be sensitive to some people. And it was all about giving the onus to them to talk about inclusion and diversity and broaden their understanding and raise their awareness and education around the subject matter, and as a result of that then come up with that collaborative pledge. So that was kind of how it worked.
I do think, sorry Rachel, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. So I think that whilst kind of I guess the research behind the pledges was more based on kind of the empowering colleagues side of things, I think a lot of it actually came from this idea that a lot of inclusion and diversity activity across different organisations is volunteer led, and it's not something that forms a part of people's roles in huge ways. So coming up with ideas and looking to other companies for best practice and those sorts of things, you don't often see a lot of things, and it is a lot of companies kind of coming up with their own ideas, and so you've got to sort of embrace it and run it and see how it goes, because there's not a lot of stuff out there that you can really take on board.
Really good point, actually. That running on good faith is such a challenge in this field, isn't it? And often that burden's probably the wrong word, right? But often the responsibility for that work is put on people of colour, and I think that in itself is probably an equal balance, isn't it? So actually, your roundtable has been a great platform to other companies to say, oh, what are we all doing, and how can we work together? So hopefully that continues for a long time and we get more businesses on board to sort of join in.
Yeah, and I feel like by empowering our people to have those conversations, it meant that we're capturing the hearts and minds of them.
Yeah.
Because we're actually getting them involved, in the mission. It's not something that's coming from the top. It's something that's coming from the ground up, and they're responsible for leading it out and for driving the conversation forward. So I found that super powerful.
Thank you. Okay, so Prince, when you first thought of pledges, what was the utopia? What did you think? You know what? In an ideal world, I'd like pledges to end up here.
Yeah, I think for me it was to encourage everyone really to have a conversation around inclusion and diversity, and actually to take this conversation even further by committing to an action that would lead to really meaningful and tangible change.
Yeah. So is that for everyone? Or is that certain people? Is that management, or is that everyone in Nationwide?
That was for everyone in Nationwide.
Brilliant. Okay, so I suppose the obvious question is, what have you both pledged? So Rachel, I'll start with you. What have you pledged?
Yeah, of course. So I've pledged at a few different levels, I guess. So on a personal level, I've pledged as a white woman to talk all about allyship and showing other people that they can get involved in something that doesn't necessarily directly impact them, and also helping to educate and really place an emphasis on language and the importance of it. So one thing I found is that people aren't often wanting to talk about certain things because they don't think that they'll say the right thing, or they think that they might slip up. So it's just showing people that you can have those conversations and providing them with the language and the tools you need to be able to do that. And then kind of at a broader level, as part of the partnerships work that I do, so with the external roundtable, I've pledged to help grow that and to see how we can externally take this pledge mission, and also to hold that team accountable as well. And then at a Race Together perspective, I've also helped to form their pledge too, which is sort of looking towards how we can empower people and really provide that safe space so that people can turn up to work and show up and be themselves.
Wicked. Prince?
Yeah, so really, my focus is on action leading to tangible change. So I've pledged to educate colleagues on inclusion and diversity by challenging behaviours that are not inclusive and calling those out, and then celebrating behaviours that are inclusive and championing those.
Just to pop you on the spot there, and sorry for doing this. How have you, or any examples of how you challenge behaviour? Just a sort of toolkit on how you've challenged it, because I think, speaking from experience and both from the conversations that I have at work, sometimes people struggle with that to really call it out on the spot. Any advice there?
Yes, sure. So how I challenge behaviours that aren't inclusive is by giving the colleague feedback.
Yeah.
And from kind of like my perspective on how I see that behaviour. And I think by doing this, it means you're creating an environment where it's safe to do this, because you're leading by example, and giving that feedback in front of other colleagues, and they can see that, you know, this is a safe thing to do. There's no fear, there's no judgment. It's okay to do this. We're doing this for the betterment of our society. So yeah,
Thank you.
it's just being brave with it, and framing it in a way that is constructive.
So, Rachel, when you were speaking about your pledge, you talked about holding the network to account.
Mm-hmm.
Why are success measures so important?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and probably myself and Prince had this discussion, would say was initially maybe a gap with the pledges, right? In that you can, at first, it's really easy to say you're going to do all of these things, right? So you can write a list of all of the things in an ideal world you'd like to do, but then what can you actually tangibly do to kind of measure that and say this has been a success? Okay, so if I pledge to help educate people, how am I going to actually do that? You know, it's all good and well saying that, but then if somebody asked me again in a year's time, how did you educate people? If I didn't set myself some success measures to measure myself against, then I wouldn't know that I'd actually done it, and I wouldn't really have had an easy way of working towards it and to evidence it. So I guess that's something that we're like really trying to implement now, and something that we're bringing into our goal setting across the organisation too. So I think that it's getting people to actually follow up on their actions that they've pledged to do.
Nice. And Prince, I think, this is an area where it's people sometimes look at it as a tick box exercise, don't they? The network's doing this, I'm going to make a pledge, and if it wasn't for Rachel sort of measuring, okay, so what have you done with that pledge? People could easily look at it as a tick box exercise. So how have you ensured authenticity and commitment to pledges?
I think for us, it's been all about, getting people to understand the importance of making those pledges and the difference that those pledges can bring about in terms of to colleagues' careers, and kind of like the environment that everyone works in.
So that difference is yeah, okay, yeah. So you're showing people, okay, here's where we are, but here's where we could be if we pledge to make a change. And I suppose also that leading by example is really important, isn't it? Not just yourselves, but seeing other people within the organisation making those pledges really does make a difference. So I ask you, has buy-in ever been a challenge with this initiative?
No, it's not. It's not been challenging at all, because we've received support centrally from all the senior leaders at Nationwide. I guess the challenges initially were all around kind of like setting up the team to then go out and influence pledge for change across the society.
And I think so. Just on that, whilst the setup is really important, it's something that kind of grew over time too. So, and also, I guess, to add to that authenticity point of view, Prince and the Pledge for Change team went and they ran loads of one-to-one sessions to help people form something that was going to be personal to their business area or to their role and those sorts of things. So having the team to be in a position to enable that was really important, and that was something that they learned and grew and developed over time. So the buy-in itself wasn't really difficult because people knew that this was something we needed to talk about. They understood I&D is something that we want to face into, and as an organisation, it's quite good at having that open culture, but it's just providing people with the materials and the support in order to have that conversation that was sort of the area that Prince and his team did an amazing job at working on.
So I'm interested in your approach. When you come up with this idea and you did that example within the branch, did you go to senior management right away and say, look, I want to roll this out across the society? Or did you start from the grassroots and work your way up?
So I started from the grassroots and worked my way up in the branches, like within my region. And then I went up to the senior management and said, okay, I want to roll this out kind of like society-wide, because I feel like, we could really make a difference.
Nice. Thank you.
So it's all about, a grassroots movement, working together collaboratively as a big community towards a collective goal.
So I know, you spoke about wanting to empower people to have these conversations. And I think this is an area where people are, they're self-confessed. They have a little bit of knowledge in this area. It's one of those things, don't talk about race, don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics. I think that's by design as well, that we don't talk about these issues because it keeps the status quo the same. How have you made sure that pledges are informed and educated and people are making the right pledges for the right reasons?
Yeah, so we've created a support pack to help people facilitate the conversations around inclusion and diversity. And within that, it includes kind of like examples of different pledges that have been made kind of across the business as a way to kind of like inspire them on what a good pledge looks like, what a progressive pledge would look like. As we realize that some people don't know where to start in regard to this conversation. So it's important to give them the tools and the support to do so. We've also worked one-to-one with individuals, teams, and different business areas to support them on their pledge journeys by attending different Pledge for Change sessions where we facilitate that conversation and help them to broaden that understanding of I&D and come up with the pledges themselves. So creating that support structure and safe space where they can talk about it freely has kind of like really given them the tools to come up with the pledges.
I know at Gem would be really interested in getting our hands on that research and resource and taking one of those workshops and getting stuck in, because I think facilitating that conversation is really important. If you leave people to it, they're going to get nervous, aren't they? It's understandable. It's a potentially touchy subject, but I think things like pledges really sort of removes that touchiness from it, because we're all making a commitment, and I think that's really quite powerful thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. As you say, just leading from the front and being brave with it, it kind of inspires the people around you and gives them kind of that confidence to have the conversations themselves and come up with those pledges. So yeah.
And I also think one of the good central resources we have is the language guidelines too. So one of the things that we noticed was people weren't having the conversations because they didn't know how to, something I was sort of touching on earlier. So we now have a central place that people can go to where they are able to kind of read these guidelines and understand the sort of terms that we use for certain things. So they know which words and phrases to avoid, and then which ones are like good replacements or alternatives.
That's really good, actually, because I think I don't know if it's a societal problem or anything, but people always say, oh, you can't say anything nowadays, and they complain, right? And if you're offering people solutions, okay, you can't say that because it's offensive, but you can say this, and it's more appropriate that way. I think people feel a lot better about those language barriers. Tell us some successes then. I think I'm really interested to hear, what are the successes been so far?
Yeah, so this was a grassroots movement, as I mentioned, that I started in the branch in Brighton in the southeast region, and went on to build the Pledge for Change team. And together we captured the hearts and minds of over 12,000 colleagues, including the CEO, the board of directors, and nationwide senior leadership team, all to come together as one community for common purpose, to empower all colleagues and nationwide to thrive. So for me, I think that's the hugest success. Bringing people together, as one family, one team, one community to actually drive cultural change is, I think, very powerful.
Massive. I mean, you mentioned the Southeast there. I mean, how diverse is the Southeast? I'm just intrigued. Do you know?
Not very diverse.
Yeah, I didn't think it was. So, I mean, that in itself is a success. To bring an initiative like that and to get buy-in and to get traction, so that it moves forward and upwards is huge in and of itself. So, congrats to you guys. Congrats to the Brighton branch. That's massive. And Rachel, what have some of your successes been?
Yeah, good question. I think from my point of view, it's kind of been around how we can take this forward and how we can provide some more central support behind it, and how we can make sure that everything that that Prince has work to do doesn't just stop there, so that there's space for this to kind of grow arms and legs, and reach that external audience, but also again with the providing the resources internally for people. So I would have said that kind of it's helping it to stay alive now is what I'm really excited and passionate about.
Any surprises?
And just to touch on the point as well, Rachel, but if we kind of look at nationwide now compared to 2 years ago, I&D is now at the forefront of everyone's minds. They're talking about it more. The conversation is central and important to everything that we do, and the pledges help build that momentum. And I think again that's another huge success. Getting that conversation started, and getting people to speak up more.
If I'm right, it's a hashtag, isn't it? Hashtag pledge the number 4 change, right? Is that right? So
That's right.
Is that something that people have shared externally as well? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on Twitter, Facebook, etc.? Maybe not Facebook with a hashtag, I don't know. But are they out and about with these hashtags?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, people have shared them on our internal nationwide social network,
Yeah.
and as well as on Twitter and on LinkedIn too. So yeah, it's a movement.
Mine's my LinkedIn picture.
Love that. How did that make you feel when you're seeing these pledges for change? How does that make you feel?
Yeah, it made me feel really proud that people are getting involved, and they all want to make a difference and work together towards it. So yeah, I guess a feeling of pride is the overriding feeling.
So Rachel, so far in this journey, has anything surprised you? Have you been surprised by anything, caught off guard?
I think so, but I wouldn't necessarily say surprised in a negative way. But I think the thing that really was a nice surprise has been how open to having the conversations people have been. I don't think necessarily I would have expected so many people to just be so willing to have those conversations and almost jumping at the chance once they were given the resource and the conversation starters and the excuse to have the conversation. It was almost like people weren't not having the conversation. It was that they just didn't know how. And so that's been, I guess, the real positive surprise that's come out from this. Any
surprises for you, Prince?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's been surprises, but it's just been learnings, like what Rachel just said, that people just needed support and the tools to have those conversations, but the appetite was already there.
Brilliant. Okay, so one of the conversations that I was having at work was sort of a nervousness or apprehension around making a pledge, and particularly getting members of the network to make pledges, because when you say make a pledge in this area, it can sometimes feel a bit daunting, right? I have to pledge for change and I have to change myself, all these sorts of grand ideas. But realistically, pledges can be relatively small, can't they? They can be changing your own actions or reading 3 books in a I don't know, a year, or whatever the case may be. But what's been the pledge that has excited you guys the most? Rachel, to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the obvious one would be to talk about the CEO's pledge. So I know that Prince did an amazing job at getting Joe Garner to actually make a pledge himself. So, and that was really exciting to have that buy-in from the CEO. But actually, the one that probably excites me the most, and I mean, it's kind of cheating on the question, right? Because it's 10,000 pledges that we got rather than just one pledge. But all of the branch staff getting involved in that sheer volume of people pledging was just amazing to see, because they're the people that are outwardly facing into our customers, so that we know that the members of Nationwide now have staff working there and interacting with them with this whole idea of inclusion, diversity, well-being in mind, and you just know that you've almost got the right staff there in the right place. So seeing that we were equipped to be having those conversations within the branches and how much traction it gained there was just really exciting.
Huge. I mean, I just want to pick back up on that one as well, Rachel, if I can. 10,000 people.
Yep.
10,000 people. But then also to get the CEO of Nationwide Building Society. So how many employees in Nationwide? Rough figure?
Prince, you got any ideas?
We're talking 20,000, right? 20,000 people in Nationwide. This guy's the CEO of the organization. The organization makes millions a year, I'm going to guess. Just throw it out there. This guy made a pledge because of what you did, Prince. Your idea. I don't even want to downplay that whatsoever. Like, that's huge. That's such an achievement. And I think for me, I'm literally sitting here inspired and energized to say, you know what? It can be done. It can be done. No matter any level of resistance, any level of time that it's taken, you can reach the top of an organization and make that real difference and that real change. So thank you for that inspiration, and thank you for all that work that you've done, because it's absolutely massive for someone like me to sit there and see that and hear that and be inspired by that is huge. So thank you. What's been the pledge that's excited you the most, Prince?
Yeah, I'd have to say for me, it's the branch pledges, because it had quite a huge impact on me, seeing kind of like people come together and work together towards towards a common goal. So I think for me, it's the branch pledges and the power of people, and just us being able to empower people and put the onus on them for kind of like the changes that they want to see. So yeah, definitely the branch pledges for me.
Brilliant.
I think also another really exciting one was the non-exec directors that pledged as well. So we managed to get involvement from all of them too.
Is that like the board?
Yeah, that's our board.
Come on, again. Listen, this is a professional podcast, right? But I need to get the buttons out because, we all work in organisations, and I think sometimes anything above a manager feels a bit untouchable. And for you guys to say, we broke that ceiling and we got them to not only support us, but to take part. And that's huge. So again, I'm going to pick your brains and sort of figure out how you did that. And hopefully we can do a part 2 and we can talk about some successes in my field as well. Okay. So Rachel, you mentioned earlier about, your focus now is about moving it forward, getting it external and keeping the pledge alive, so to speak. So you've laid the groundwork now. Where do you see this going?
Yeah, absolutely. What I would really love to see is this idea and the general idea of setting goals and holding yourselves accountable, leave Nationwide, and also stay within Nationwide, but leave as well and spread out to other companies. I think it would be amazing to see that a network of people that you could almost externally engage with as well, so that you know that you've got external accountability from other organizations, because at an organizational level you've said you're going to do something, so let's make sure that we tell other people, and then they also make the same sort of commitments, and you've got each other then to look at and really hold each other to account. So that's something. But also what I would really like to see internally going forward is just that more support for our staff to know the impact of the pledges they're having, to be able to really track and monitor the progress. And I know Prince is working on some really exciting stuff around that, and how we can keep engaging people in an interactive way and really make it a tangible thing.
I think we talk about at work, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. And I think when it comes to that external organisation to organisation accountability, making it public is really important, isn't it? Public pledges, but then also public accountability further on down the line, 6 months later, a year later. I'm really excited to see how you guys embody that moving forward. So keep us in the loop. I'd love to know, and I'm on board, of course. So my last question for you guys is, what advice would you give to organisations that want to implement their own pledges? And I suppose the first sort of subset of that question is, what's best practice? What does best practice look like to you? Prince, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think for me, the best thing would be to just be brave and start having that conversation. I think that's the first step, because only that would lead to action. So yeah, that would be the first steps for me.
I also think getting together a really strong case study so that you can take it forward. So Prince, for instance, managed to get the branch on board first, and he showed that this worked within the branch. It can work externally too.
Right.
So having something that shows that it's going to work, it's almost linking back to that research bit. So Prince did his research, I guess, by engaging with the branches.
Yeah.
if you can show it worked really well in this company, we've tried it with a small sector within our company and we think it could scale up really well. It's almost, that would be something I would suggest to do, so that when you're engaging with senior people, you can really show the impact that it's going to have and show the benefit to employees.
So I think applying that to where I am then, I mean, you guys are the exemplar. You know, you've done it in Nationwide. The GEM staff network at UON, we could be a sort of pilot study for the whole of UON, and then we roll it out across the organisation. That would be the sort of, the path you've laid.
Yeah, 100%.
Nice. Someone did ask me, when you speak to these guys, ask them how long does it take to create a pledge? People are, you know, they're time strapped, aren't they? So they want to know, how long does it take to create a pledge?
Depends, right? I would say. So if you're going to make a pledge with your entire team, then maybe it would take a little bit longer, because you want to sit down and really get into the depths of the conversation about why are we saying this, and you might want to workshop it. But if you're making it at an individual level, it could be something really simple. And, you know, this is where we're leaving it down to the people to decide what they want to do. Because one person could say, okay, I want to make sure that I'm reading one article a week that talks about some form of inclusion, diversity, wellbeing, something about that. Or I want to make sure that I directly, when I'm working with my line reports, are asking them, how are you? And, you know, what's going on? And that's a really simple pledge. If you can just pledge to one thing, and it, you know, that could take you 30 seconds to write. I'm not saying that you haven't put any thought into it, but it really depends how deep you want to take it, I guess.
Okay. Prince, when making a pledge, is there anything people should avoid?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing to avoid would be kind of making it a pledge that hasn't got kind of any action behind it. So making kind of like a generalized pledge, I'd say that would be something to avoid. So sticking to something with a commitment to an action, I think is much more powerful, because that means that you're able to then like review it and hold someone to account for that action to see if they've brought it to life, or, you know, kind of like what challenges they've faced in kind of bringing that action to life, or what successes they've had as well. And I guess with the pledges as well, it's like a live conversation, like a live conversation, and like an evolving document. So it doesn't have to be just like, oh, I've made my pledge, this is it. You can keep going back to it, reviewing it, making stronger pledges as your understanding increases, and, you know, and making different pledges, where you're at the journey as well. So yeah.
You know what? I think it's interesting what you said about doing things that aren't measurable, because I think particularly around conversations in this field, there's almost like a good and bad dichotomy. Yeah, racism is bad, not racism is good, and it's not as simple as that, is it? There's a spectrum, particularly when you factor in things like anti-racism, and that's when you have to create action to be anti-racist. You can't just sit on the sidelines and be an inactive bystander, because by virtue, then you are racist. You're participating in racism. And I think that is where people, I think, sometimes struggle to grasp the concept of racism, and they think it is just this good versus bad. It's not. It's so much more nuanced. And I think by creating a pledge that is measurable, you're encouraging yourself to go and create action in the positive way. And I think that's really, really powerful.
And I think it's taking people from being maybe a passive ally of somebody who's like, I agree, racism is bad, but I'm not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And turning them into an active ally. How can I actually go and do something with that? I've got this feeling. Let's make it into something that means I'm helping to make a change.
Yeah. So touching on organisations, again, implementing pledges, how often do you think we should review, Rachel?
It's a good question. And I think it's something that we're still working through ourselves. So at the moment, we're getting all of our senior leaders to set themselves ID&W goals, so inclusion, diversity and wellbeing goals. And we're getting them to get their line reports to do it as well. So it's intended to be a society-wide thing for all employees to do. And with that, we're looking at reviewing them annually, and also having that half annual review where you check in and see how you're doing against it. But I don't think that necessarily will be enough. I think this is something that we're still working on developing, and I think we're going to see how that goes and whether you get tangible action out of it and whether you're actually seeing the results from it. So it's something that I would say maybe a quarterly basis might be something worth reviewing. Definitely having more frequent checkpoints. Maybe it's something that you could bring out in your one-to-ones with your line manager. So you said last quarter that you were going to do all of this stuff. How have you done with it? Those sorts of things. So I think it's down to the individual as well. How often does the individual want to be tied to it?
Prince, are there any best tools for measuring success?
Yeah, I think for me, it would be the power of the conversations here would be kind of like the best tool, because like having those conversations with your teams around kind of like the pledges and asking the questions of like how they're bringing those pledges to life and holding them to account for them. It means that you can learn kind of about those challenges they're facing on their journey, and help them to overcome it and evolve them going forward. So yeah, I think the conversations as a check-in to see how they're getting on their journey would be kind of like a way to measure how successful they're being.
Brilliant, thank you. I mean, I've just thought, as you were saying that, one thing I'd like to, and the problem is with this is you can get into a numbers game, right, when it comes to measurement, and it's not a numbers game, particularly with this. It is an impact game, not even a game, but you know what I'm trying to say. I'm thinking, could we count how many hashtags there are today versus how many there are in 6 months versus how many there are in 8 months? Could that be a measurement? I'm just thinking about what I would do at work. Could we measure how many people commit via a hashtag and use that as some sort of proxy for success, maybe? And again, it is the review. I think the reviews is really where it's at. It's okay. So you said you were going to do this, but what did you do? That's the real crux of the matter for me as well. So I think those conversations, like you're saying, and overall, how do you feel within the organisation 6 months down the line? Do you feel like the conversation has opened up? Because I think that's the real game changer. It's how do you see yourself within that culture? And if nothing has changed, then nothing has been done. But if something has changed, then something has been done. So yeah, really powerful. Just to close then, I suppose, you mentioned a few resources that are available internally. How willing is probably the wrong word, right? But how able are you to share these resources externally? I'm really interested to know.
I think it's something that we can definitely look into with our kind of external branding team and those sorts of things. I think there's definitely some best practice that we do that we're more than willing to share and engage with our external partners on. So one of the things I always do when I come to the partnerships work stream is I've had this really good conversation or enlightening workshop about allyship this week. And then I'll talk to people about how I've done it. And then I've said, just get in touch with me if you want to get some more resources. And I'm always happy to have conversations about the sorts of things that I've done and the sorts of things that I've come up with, just because I can appreciate that will help spread to other organisations at that point. So I'm always more than happy to have a conversation.
I think it's it's important for me to say this right now, that actually most guests that we've had on so far, I've either been related to or friends with, but you guys are colleagues, so to speak, not colleagues of mine, but colleagues of each other, and we've met on this round table, and you've been willing to come on this podcast and share your story. So I can personally vouch for Rachel and for Prince that they are personable, they are approachable, and they are willing to share this. And obviously, if 45 organisations get in touch, they may be restricted for time, but generally speaking, they're really open and willing to have the chat. So reach out to them. As far as I'm aware, there is nationwide support in this Pledges initiative, isn't there? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So where's the best place to contact Rachel?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that you can reach out. So I guess my personal nationwide email address is one, and then my LinkedIn profile. So I'm Rachel Murray, and then email address is rachel.murray2@nationwide.co.uk. And I'm more than happy to have conversations with people via that. And I sit within the central inclusion, diversity and wellbeing team. So if anything comes out of those conversations, I'll be able to be the person best placed, I guess, to help direct it and get some more internal support.
Prince, is it the same for you?
Yeah, I'd say just like more than willing to have a conversation and kind of like help anyone who wants to start their journey along that and support them. And the best way to do that was just to reach out to me. So my email is prince.ndlovu@nationwide.co.uk, and I'm also on LinkedIn as well as Prince Ndlovu. So yeah, again, just drop me a line, and more than willing to help support and drive this mission forward. So,
brilliant. Well, thank you both so much. I'll put all your contact details and any resources in the description below, so please feel free to check it out. Is there any last things you want to let the audience know?
I think one thing that would be really great if you can drop this in the details as well is the template that we use to to submit the pledges. And then if people want to post it on LinkedIn and hashtag pledge for change, then we'd love to see the kinds of pledges that you're making.
Yeah. I would like to see them as well. I'd love to see some pledges and get some inspiration. Just to give you guys some context, we're going to, once this podcast is out, we're going to share it with the GEM staff network at the University of Northampton, get them on board to create pledges, and we're going to make it a condition of joining the network, actually, that you must create a pledge. And I think, you guys really inspired that action because, for us, we do want to see that tangible change and that tangible action. And this is a great mechanism for getting that. So thank you so much. Also, I want to bring it back to the fact that you got the CEO of Nationwide to make a pledge. For me, I'm really inspired. I'm going to go about my weekend being inspired with that. So thank you both. There we have it. That has been Before Our Friends Die on the digital network akhi&saltfish. So please, if you want to get in touch with us, that is akhi&saltfish@gmail.com and akhi&saltfish on all social media platforms. So please do not shy away. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Rochelle will be back next time. And until then, we'll see you soon.